This is Debbie here with spiritualcrusade.com, and I'm kind of geeking out about these chapters that we're going to be doing today because I'm so excited about them. This is the end of Acts, and I don't know if anyone else has just loved Acts as much as I have, but I have just loved it. So we have learned so much about Paul in this journey through Acts, and these last couple chapters are so beautiful. It's the most beautiful ending to Acts. It's just so beautiful because it's all about testimony, his testimony. So today we're going to be reading chapters 22 through 28, or summarizing. Don't worry, I'm not going to read the whole thing. And last week's were about missionary work, and today is about testimony. And we're really going to see his testimony, and I love these chapters. I love these chapters, guys, so I'm so excited about today. So just really quick, I want to give a shout out for spiritualcrusade.com. That's our website, and if you haven't been there yet, jump on over there. For everyone who is new, welcome, and everyone who has seen me before and been with us on this journey through Acts, welcome back. We are so excited to have you back, and we're excited about today. All right, so if you remember at the very end of last week's, Paul was being taken away, and on his way out, he stops, and he just says, "Can I speak with you?" to the chief. And the chief captain allows him to. And then you just have to love Paul, because he basically pulls people. It says, and when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs, so just imagining him on the stairs there, being carried away to prison. And it says he beckoned with his hand. So there's this total visual of him just gathering the people. And it says, and when they were made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, saying, and that's where we ended last week. So now we get to know what he says. Well, I'm not going to read the whole thing. You have to read it yourself, but it's so good. So I wish I could read it all, but we're just going to summarize really quickly. So just for starters here, I love in verse 1, it says, I am verily a man which am a Jew. And then a little bit further down it says, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous towards God, as you all are this day. What I like about this is right up from the beginning, he's likening himself to them. He's finding something in common. He's saying, just like you guys, I was taught in the ways of the fathers, and I love he used the word zealous. I was zealous towards God. I was doing what I thought was right. And then he's going to go on to say he persecuted the people. He says, and I persecuted this way. Now, when the scriptures use the words this way or the way, I looked it up actually, and it refers to the way of Christianity. They just call it the way, but it's the Christian movement. It says the way is often used to refer to Christianity. So he says here, and I persecuted this way, also the way, this way, Christianity, unto the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women. At this point, I am sure this part of the story is very hard for him to bear. I can't imagine, because now he loves Jesus Christ so much, and he loves his people so much, these Christians that he is fighting for at this point. So I'm sure this is hard for him to tell, but he's going to tell his story. So after this, he's going to tell the story of his road to Damascus, which, like I said, it must be very hard for him to tell, but he tells it beautifully. And I talked about earlier in some of the earlier chapters how he was called Brother Saul by how do you say that one? Ananias? Okay, Ananias. So sorry about my not being able to pronounce the words sometimes. You guys have to bear with me and not judge me. Okay, so Ananias calls him Brother Saul when he first meets him. And if you remember back from when I talked about this, it's a beautiful moment for him because he's being called brother to a people that persecuted him. So he does retell his story, and he talks about how he was called Brother Saul. And then, and so he goes on to tell his story, his what's it called? His road to Damascus story. And then in verse 22 it says, and they gave him audience unto this word, and then lifted up their voices and said, away with such fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live. They were not happy about his story. And and 24, the chief captain commanded that he should be examined by scourging. This is when they whipped them with something that had with a whip that had spikes in it. So it would often, when it would hit their back and they'd pull back, it would rip the flesh off their backs. It was not, they were experts in cruelty. So in 25, he pulls out his Roman card. We've seen this before in some of our past chapters. It says, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman and uncondemned, meaning untried? At that point in time, Roman citizenship carried with it importance, and it carried with it privilege, and it was not easily obtained. And I also looked it up, and it was against the law not to hold a trial first. So he's pulling out his Roman card, and of course they're afraid. In verse 29, it says the chief captain also was afraid, for he knew that he was Roman, and after he knew that he was Roman, because he had bound him, they knew that they hadn't tried him, so they knew that this really wasn't right. So they loose his bands and bring him before the council. Okay, we're going to move on to chapter 23, but guys, read every bit of this. It's so good. Okay, so in 23, Paul says, men and brethren, I have lived in good conscience before God until this time. And the high priest commanded them that stood by to smite him on the mouth. Then said Paul unto him, God will smite thee, thou whited wall. So here, I think the first time I read this, I was like, okay, so obviously he's name calling. But I was like, what is a whited wall? Oh, it's not a name we use today. We don't usually call people a whited wall. So I looked it up, and basically he was calling him a hypocrite. He was calling him, and it kind of explains it in the next little sentence here. He said, for sittest thou to judge me after the law, and commandest me to be smitten contrary to the law. So he's kind of calling him a hypocrite here. Now, they're not happy with this, and so he's going to pull out another card, and this is that he used to be a Pharisee card. So he's going to look at it in the crowd, and he's going to see Pharisees and Sadducees. So in verse 6, he's going to pull out his Pharisee card. He says, men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Of the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am called in question. Now, in 8, we learn that the Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection, but the Pharisees believe in both. So it says, for the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, neither angel nor spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. So now he's pulling out this Pharisee card. He's going to say, those of you who are Pharisee, I'm one of you, and you guys are condemning me for stuff that you also believe in. You know what I mean? So the Pharisees at that point, they arise and they say, we find no evil in this man. And of course, the Sadducees do. So in 10, it's kind of funny how he words this in 10, because it kind of reminds me of, like, you know, when you're a little kid and you got one friend on one side of the arm and the other friend on the other side of the arm, and they're like pulling you both ways, and you're like, this is fun. Okay, so that's kind of what he reminds me of. He says, and when there arose a great dissension, the chief captain, fearing lest Paul should be pulled in pieces of them, so it kind of reminds me of them like pulling him back and forth, commanded the soldiers to go down and to take him by force from among them and to bring him into the castle. Okay, they're going to put him in jail. Now we're going to see the first miracle. Now I am going to talk today about 3 really fun moments where the Lord steps in. One is the jail incident we're going to see here. Another is a ship incident, and then we're going to see a snake incident. So stay tuned for all 3 of those beautiful incidents where the Lord really steps in, and it's just so beautiful to know that he is always there for us. So it says, and the night following, the Lord stood by him. So he stands by him in this jail. It's so beautiful. And said, be of good cheer, Paul. For as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome. So 2 things happen here. One, he's comforted. His Lord is beside him. But also, he's told he's going to be okay. Because he says, you've testified here in Jerusalem, and you're still going to testify in Rome. You're going to witness in Rome. So he's comforted, and he's also given hope that he's going to be okay. So they're determined to kill him, and this is interesting. So this is, okay, I'm just going to read it because it's so good right from the way they say it. Sometimes I try to tell the stories and I'm like, it's better in the scriptures. And when it was day, certain of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul. Now, if you're not eating or drinking, you're going to do everything you can to kill him because you want to eat and drink again. So they're going to come up with this plan. And his nephew overhears the plan. And the plan is that they're going to have the chief captain bring him down. It talks about, the plan is in 15. It says, now therefore, ye with the council signify to the chief captain that he bring him down unto you tomorrow as though he were to inquire something more perfectly concerning him. And we, or ever he come near, are ready to kill him. So they're saying, we're going to do this in secret. He's going to bring him down like he's just doing his thing. We're going to lie in wait, and we're going to kill him. So his nephew hears the plan in 16, and then Paul helps his nephew to tell the chief captain, because the chief captain wasn't part of the plan. So the nephew tells the chief captain, and in 22, the chief captain says, see thou tell no man that thou hast showed these things to me. So then in 23 and 24, we see the chief captain's plan. And he writes a letter to Felix. So it says in 23, and he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70, and spearmen 200 at the 3rd hour of the night. Huge army. And provide them beasts that they may set Paul on and bring him safe unto Felix the governor. And he wrote a letter after this manner. Now, this letter, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I do find this part a little bit, I enjoy his personality here. This chief captain. Says, this man was taken of the Jews, and should have been killed of them. Then came I with an army and rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman. I don't know why I enjoyed his personality, but when I read it, I was like, okay, he's kind of coming in the white, the hero on the white horse. You know what I mean? I bring him with my army. Okay, so Paul is brought to the governor, and then and we're gonna move on. So he's kept in Herod's judgment hall. We're going to move on to 24. And after 5 days, so he's there for 5 days. Tertullus? Okay, forgive me. I wish I was better at these words, but this man, Tertullus, began to accuse him. And he accuses him in 15 of sedition, which is inciting people to rebel against the authority of the government. He says, for we have found this man a pestilent fellow. So apparently we have found this man an annoyance. And a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. So Paul asks if he could speak for himself. So Paul's smart. And he's going to say, okay, you've heard this guy and what he has to say. But in 10 he says, for as much as I know that thou hast been of many years a judge, so you've been a judge for many years, unto this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself. I would like to gladly speak for myself on this matter, because, these guys are liars. So then he goes on to say, I've been here for 12 days and you guys haven't been able to find anyone to accuse me. He says in verse 11, but there are yet but 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem for worship. And in verse 12, he says, and they neither found me in the temple disputing with any man, neither raising up the people in the synagogues. So basically saying, you haven't you haven't found anybody to really prove that I'm doing any of this wrong. In fact, I'm not doing any of this wrong. Then he's going to give his testimony. And in 14 he says, but this I confess unto thee, that after the way, Christianity, we already learned that, which they call heresy, so worship I the God of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets, and have hope towards God, which they themselves also allow, that there shall be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. And herein do I exercise myself to have always a conscience void of offense towards God and towards man. Now, I love that part right there. To have a conscience void of offense towards God and towards man. I really just want to stop. I wish I could just stop the thing, but I can't. But just think about if we could say that at the end of our lives. That would be so beautiful. He says in 18, whereupon certain Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with multitude nor tumult. Now that just means he came here to relieve the suffering, not to incite rebellion. So he says, they found me in the temples. I was bringing aid and relief, not tumult. I was not coming here to fight or to cause mischief. Okay, so Felix is moved by his testimony. You see that in verse 24 and 25, However, Felix is not that great of a man. And even though he's moved by his testimony, he's not going to give in. So it says that in 26, he hoped also that money should have been given him of Paul, that he might loose him. So he wanted Paul to pay him to let him go, really. But he wouldn't. And in 25, it says, go thy way for this time. When I have a convenient season, I will call thee. So put him in prison. When it's convenient for me to see him, I will call him. And of course, in the next verse, it said he wanted money for him, so he didn't call him. And in verse 27, we learn that he was in that jail for 2 years. So Felix never came to him. We're moving on to chapter 25, but we don't know what happened to Felix. There's no end to his story. So here we see that he leaves him in there for 2 years, and then Festus is going to be his successor. And we're going to jump down to 14 and chapter 25, 14, Festus says to the king, there is a certain man left in bonds by Felix. So we know that Felix died somehow or something, because Paul was just left in bonds when Festus came into power. So let's just go back to 9. We're going to go back there. I just wanted to just jump forward so you know that we're moving on to Festus, but we don't know. Felix died somehow, so we'll just go with that. Okay, so in verse 9, we see that Festus wants to take Paul to Jerusalem where Paul's enemies will kill him, but Paul is smarter than that. And in the next couple of verses, Paul says, I want to appeal to Caesar. And so Festus says, okay, if you want to appeal to Caesar, you can appeal to Caesar. And then at 13, and after certain days, King Agrippa and Bernice come into Caesarea to salute Festus. This is a huge part of Paul's story, being able to bear testimony to King Agrippa. Because if you remember, back in the beginning, Jesus said that Paul was, what was the exact words? He was to be I'm not going to be able to find them. Basically, he said that Paul was to be a chosen vessel to bear his name before the Gentiles, kings, and the children of Israel. So him bearing testimony before King Agrippa is really important, because from the very beginning, the Lord, prophesied. There's the word I'm looking for. I get excited and I just talking. Got to slow down. That he would bear testimony before kings. And so here he will. So this is a really important part of Paul's story. So, okay, let's go back. And after certain days, King Agrippa and Bernice came into Caesarea to salute Festus. And when they had been there many days, Festus declared Paul's case unto the king, saying, there's a certain man left in bonds by Felix. Now, King Agrippa, just so you know, was the 11th and last king in the Jewish dynasty. I cannot say that word right now on camera. Sometimes I just can't say the words. So he is the last of the Jewish kings, basically. Herodian dynasty. The last of the Jewish Herodian dynasty. Got it, guys. I got it. Okay, I make myself laugh sometimes. So Festus is going to explain Paul's situation, and King Agrippa responds in 22. He says, tomorrow thou shalt hear him. And this part makes me laugh. And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice with great pomp. I like it because when I'm reading the scriptures, when they throw in little things like that with great pomp, it gives me a picture. Like I'm imagining them coming in their finest, and they're all pompous and full of themselves, and it just kind of I got a picture of it, okay? So, and was entered into the place of hearing with the chief captains and principal men of the city. At Festus's commandment, Paul was brought in. Okay, so Paul is going to be brought in. And like I said, this is an important part of Paul's life, because he was meant to testify before kings. Okay, we're going to move on to chapter 26. We're going to see Paul's testimony. And he's also going to share his story about his road to Damascus. Now, I'm going to jump to 19. So we've got this beautiful testimony, his story of his road to Damascus. And in 19 he says, whereupon, O King Agrippa, I was not disobedient unto the heavenly vision. So I love Paul, because he was fighting against something with all that he had. And then he found out he was on the wrong side. He turned completely, changed completely. And I love how he says, I was not obedient unto the heavenly vision. I have been 100% obedient to this vision, to this heavenly vision. I love that. And then in 22, having therefore obtained help of God, God has helped me. This is not all me. I continue until this day, witnessing both to small and great, saying none other things than those which the prophets and Moses did say should come. So the prophets and Moses, all these people have prophesied of these things. I'm not making this stuff up. That Christ should suffer and that he should be the first that should rise from the dead and should show light unto this people and to the Gentiles. Beautiful testimony right there. And Festus is not happy. So he's going to stand up and he says with a loud voice, and it says right here, Festus says with a loud voice, Paul, thou art besides thyself. Much learning doth make thee mad. And then Paul stands up for himself and he says, I am not mad, most noble Festus, but speak forth the words of truth and soberness. And I love that he is not going to become small in this moment. Here he is being yelled at by the great men, and he's not going to curl up in a hole and be like, yeah, maybe I am. No, he says, I am not mad. I speak the truth. I stand here before you and I speak the truth. Now he's going to call King Agrippa out. Now he knows that King Agrippa knows of all the things that he's said. King Agrippa was, he was there. He knows about all this stuff. He wasn't, well, let's just read it and it'll explain it. For the king knoweth of these things, before whom also I speak freely. For I am persuaded that none of these things are hidden from him. For this thing was not done in a corner. Christ was not crucified in a corner. He didn't do miracles in a corner. His gospel hasn't been preached in a corner. King Agrippa knows all these things. He is very aware of what I'm saying. He's going to call him out. King Agrippa, believeth, this is in 27, believest thou the prophets? I know that thou believest. Okay, this is the saddest thing ever. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, almost thou persuadeth me to be a Christian. It is probably the saddest words ever spoken. It just breaks my heart that he chose not to act. If you almost believe, then there's enough that you know. He felt truth. He knew what was being talked about. And yet he chose not to act on it. So almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. And Bruce C. Hafen says this really good quote. He says, if we almost keep the commandments, we almost receive the blessings. So here he says, thou almost persuadest me to believe. Well, King Agrippa, you almost received the blessings that come with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So it's really sad to me that he did not believe at that moment. So in 31, when they were gone aside, they talked between themselves, saying, this man doeth nothing worthy of death or bonds. Then said Agrippa unto Festus, this man might have been set at liberty if he had not appealed unto Caesar. But remember, when the Lord was with him in Paul in the prison, he said, thou wilt go and witness in Rome. And Festus put him in a corner by trying to send him back to Jerusalem. So he had to appeal before Caesar. So he had no choice. So Caesar, going to Rome is in the cards for him. But here King Agrippa is saying, there's no reason to kill this man. Okay, 27 is going to be his voyage. And in verse, we're just going to just skim through this because we're running out of time. So I'm just going to tell you this story. It's awesome. So in verse 9 through 11, we're going to see that Paul's going to tell them they're on this voyage, and Paul's going to say, hey, don't leave here, because where are they at? Wherever they're at, it says, now when much time was spent and when sailing was now dangerous because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them. Now the fast, I looked it up, is probably referring to a Jewish holy day called the Day of Atonement, which marks the beginning of the season, usually an unsafe time to travel because of the storms. So Paul says, sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the landing and ship, but also of our lives. Nevertheless, the centurions believed the master of the owner of the ship more than the things which were spoken to Paul. I understand where they're coming from. Here you have a prisoner and you have a master of a ship. So I understand why they were like, we're going to set out, but it is going to be a sad day. Okay, so they're going to have this huge storm, and they're going to pretty much think that all is lost. It says in 20, it says, no small tempest lay on us. All hope that we should be saved was then taken away. 21. Paul. I don't know how long. I know in verse 13 it says the third day we cast out. So I know that there's this he's been keeping his mouth shut for a while, but he's gonna kind of like slip in here. And I love how he does this because it's kind of funny because it says, but after long abstinence, so after not speaking for a long time, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and says, Sirs, ye should have hearkened unto me and not have loosed from Crete, and to have gained this harm and loss. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life from among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am, and whom I serve. Isn't that beautiful? Come on, that's beautiful. And then in 25 he says, for I believe God, that it shall be even as it was told me. So this is the second one. Remember we had the jail one where the Lord came and stood by him, and here he has the angel of the Lord come to him and tell him that no one's life will be lost, but they will lose the ship. So he tells them that. They're going to continue out. We're just going to skim because we don't have time for it all. But at some point, the ship gets stuck, and they want to throw all the prisoners out down in 42. But the centurion wants to save Paul because obviously Paul at this point knows more than everyone else. So the centurion says, if you know how to swim, swim. If you don't, grab a board. It even says that. And the rest, some on boards and some on broken pieces of the ship. And so it came to pass that they all escaped safe to land. Okay, last chapter, chapter 28, guys. Hang in there. This is awesome. This is going to go pretty fast. Okay, we're going to tell the snake story. This is the third of our stories. We have the jail, the ship, and the snake. So they're going to land on this land, and it says, and the barbarous people showed us no little kindness, for they kindled a fire and received us everyone because of the present rain and because of the cold. So the barbarous people, but they're going to receive them. Now Paul's going to go out to get sticks, and while he's doing that, a viper, a snake's going to bite him and catch onto his hand. And the people there of this island are going to be like, oh, this man is meant to die. He is in for it. But then he shakes the snake off into the fire, and the people all are like, okay, we're going to wait and see what happens. So they're going to wait, and it says they looked when he should have swollen or fallen down dead suddenly. But after they had looked a great while, so they're like waiting for him. They're like, okay, where's the swelling? He's going to drop dead any minute now. That was a very poisonous snake, so he should die any minute now. And saw no harm come to him. They changed their minds. And they're like, okay, this man was not meant to die. And said that he was a god. Okay, and then the chief man of this people, his name is Publius. And once again, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but we're going to go with it because I don't know how else to say it. His father is very sick with fever, and by the laying on of hands, Paul is going to heal him. And then it's going to give us a bunch of his accounts of his traveling. He's going to enter into Rome in verse 16. Then he's going to be staying at some place in 23, and it says, there came many to him into his lodging, to whom he expounded and testified the kingdom of God, persuading them concerning Jesus, both out of the law of Moses and out of the prophets from morning till evening. And some believed the things which were spoken, and some believed not. So wherever he was staying, people came and he testified. And everybody who came, he testified to. It says Paul dwelt there 2 whole years. This is in verse 30. And in verse 31, preaching the kingdom of God and teaching those things which concern the Lord Jesus Christ with all confidence, no man forbidding him. Now we don't know exactly what happens to him, but in 2 Timothy 4:6-8, he's going to allude to his future death. And this is the one where it says, I have fought a good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith. So this is a good man. To the very end of his life, he was testifying. He was inviting people in to teach them. And at the end of his life, we learn in Timothy, where he says one of my very favorite things, I hope I can say at the end of my life, I have fought a good fight, I have finished my course, I have kept the faith. So he is a remarkable man. I have loved learning about his journey through Acts. But it doesn't end here. We get to read his letters that he wrote to the Romans. Romans is next. It says the epistle of Paul to the Romans. So these are going to be the letters to the Romans next, and so much more fun to come. So we've got a lot more fun with Paul. So stick with me and come back next time. Thank you so much for joining me. Once again, go and visit spiritualcrusade.com. There's awesome content over there. See you next time.